I live just outside of Billings, Montana, in a one-story house tucked between pine trees and dirt roads that kick up dust every time someone drives past, which isn't often. I'm 47, divorced, no kids, and I work from home fixing and reselling small engines. It's a quiet life, sometimes too quiet. Back then, I was spending most of my days in the garage tinkering, drinking cheap coffee, and listening to old rock radio. The kind of days that blur together unless something snaps you out of the routine. That something happened one Thursday in late October. I'd listed my old ATV on Craigslist the week before. Nothing fancy, just a 2007 model that still ran strong. I figured it'd bring in a few $100 and maybe free up some space in the shed. Around 5:45 p.m., a guy named Brian messaged me asking if he could come check it out that evening. His texts were short, polite, and he said he was driving in from about 40 minutes away. Seemed normal enough. I told him sure, just try to make it before it got too dark. The sun was already dipping low by the time a dusty gray pickup rolled into my driveway around 6:30. Two guys stepped out. Both looked like they were in their late 20s. One had a camo jacket and a trucker hat. The other wore a black hoodie and jeans. They looked a little rough around the edges, but nothing that set off alarms. I greeted them from the garage door, wiping my hands on an old towel, and the one in the camo introduced himself as Brian. He was friendly, chatty, asked about the ATV's mileage and how long I'd had it. The other guy didn't say a word. He kind of lingered near the back of the truck at first, then started walking around the side of the garage, like he was just stretching his legs or checking out the place. I thought maybe he was just shy or not interested in small talk. Brian kept asking questions, specific ones too, about the chain, the carburetor, even the rear suspension. It caught me a little off guard, honestly. Most buyers don't know or care about that stuff. I was halfway through explaining how I'd replaced the front shocks when something clicked. I hadn't heard the other guy come back around. I stepped out from the garage a bit and called, "Everything good back there?" No answer. That's when I felt it. This tightening in my chest. Something felt wrong, like I'd just remembered I left the stove on, only worse. Brian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. "He's just checking the frame underneath," he said casually, and for a second I wanted to believe him. I even nodded and pretended to go along with it. But I started to back toward the door anyway. My instinct was screaming, loud, but it was too late. I didn't hear the guy behind me until the metal of the tire iron cracked against the back of my head. The hit didn't knock me out completely, but it dropped me to my knees. My ears rang, vision blurred, and I remember my cheek hitting the cold concrete just inside the garage. I could feel blood trickling behind my ear. Before I could react, the guy in the black hoodie was on me, pressing a knee into my back while Brian, if that was even his real name, wrapped something around my wrists. It was fast, like they'd done this before. Not loud, not messy, just efficient and cold. They tied my wrists tight with what felt like zip ties, then used duct tape across my mouth. I couldn't even scream. My chest started heaving from panic, and all I could think about was whether they were going to kill me. They dragged me inside through the back door, like I weighed nothing. The guy in the hoodie took a quick look around the kitchen, then the hallway, while Brian opened drawers and cabinets with the kind of calm that made my skin crawl. They weren't searching. They knew what to look for. Places people hide cash, a gun, spare keys. Brian asked Hoodie, "Master bedroom?" And the guy just nodded. That was when I realized how isolated I really was. Nearest neighbors a quarter-mile away through thick trees, and I hadn't told anyone these guys were coming over. I don't even think I locked the front gate. They ransacked the place. I could hear drawers being ripped open, closet doors slammed, even the back panel of my bedroom dresser getting torn out. One of them came across my safe, a small one, meant for documents and a bit of emergency cash. and I heard a grunt of frustration followed by the unmistakable sound of a crowbar hitting metal. I lay face down on the floor, half in the kitchen, half in the hallway, blood still trickling from my scalp. Every thud made me flinch. My shoulders ached from how tight they'd bound me. I tried twisting my wrists, hoping the ties would loosen, but they didn't budge. What freaked me out the most wasn't even the violence. It was how methodical they were. They weren't panicked. They didn't yell or rush. They moved like this was just another Thursday night job. I started praying they'd just take what they wanted and leave. But then Hoodie crouched beside me and stared at me for a few seconds. No words. Just this stare, like he was deciding something. Then, out of nowhere, he whispered, "You'll be fine, just don't move for a while." And that was it. No explanation. They left me there, face down, tied up, bleeding, and disappeared. I didn't even hear the truck leave. I don't know how long I laid there exactly, but it felt like hours. The sky outside had gone pitch black, and the only light inside was the weak glow of the oven clock blinking 12 hours. My wrists were burning, and my head throbbed so bad I thought I might throw up. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to remember a detail, license plate, tattoos, accents, anything. But they'd been careful. Too careful. I eventually managed to roll onto my side and scoot myself toward the living room. Every inch felt like a mile. My shoulder scraped against the corner of a cabinet, and I nearly passed out from the pain. Still, I kept going. The landline was on the end table by the couch. Old, dusty, barely used. I had to knock it off with my forehead, and then kind of flop my shoulder against the buttons to dial 911. When the dispatcher answered, I couldn't talk. Just heavy breathing and panicked grunts through the duct tape. But they tracked the number, sent help, and about 20 minutes later I heard sirens. I've never been so relieved to see red and blue lights wash through my windows. Paramedics cut the ties, pulled the tape off my mouth, and started checking the wound on my head while I tried to explain what happened. The cops asked a million questions, but I had so few answers. Brian had used a burner number. The Craigslist profile was blank. No license plate, no fingerprints. Even the tire tracks didn't lead anywhere helpful, just dead dirt roads and pine needles. They took photos, dusted surfaces, but nothing ever came back. The guys were ghosts. My safe was gone, along with some cash I kept in a drawer, my dad's old revolver, and a few personal papers I really didn't want out there. Insurance covered the stuff, sure, but not the feeling that came after. That paranoia. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep right. Every truck that slowed near the driveway made me tense up. I installed cameras, motion lights, new locks, but nothing made me feel safe in that house again. It wasn't just the violence, it was the precision. The way they watched, planned, and executed everything like they'd rehearsed it. They didn't just rob me, they studied me, chose me. And the worst part is, I'll never know why. I moved out 2 months later, left Montana altogether, but even now, sometimes at night, I swear I hear a truck roll up the gravel, and I freeze. I don't usually post stuff like this, but I need to get it off my chest. This happened about 8 months ago, and even now, I still double-check every lock before I sit down. My name's Lauren. I was 28 at the time, and it was just me and my 2-year-old son, Mason. We had just moved into a small duplex in a quiet neighborhood outside St. Paul, Minnesota. I had recently left a really toxic relationship and was trying to rebuild our life. New town, new job, new start. The place wasn't fancy, but it had a fenced backyard and a cozy layout. I was proud of it. It finally felt like we could breathe again. That afternoon was quiet. Mason was down for his nap, and I was folding laundry on the couch with the front door open, screen locked, letting in some fresh air. The neighborhood was usually dead silent. mostly older couples and a few families. Around 2:30 p.m. I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked up and saw a man standing there, maybe mid-40s, with a salt and pepper beard and a neon yellow utility vest. He was holding a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. He didn't look homeless or anything, but something about him felt off. His eyes didn't match the polite smile on his face. They were flat, unreadable. He said he was from the gas company and needed to check something in the basement. I asked what company he was with, and he just gestured vaguely to the patch on his vest, except it didn't look right. It was just a plain patch. No name, no logo. I told him I wasn't expecting anyone and hadn't received any notice. He shrugged and said it was routine. When I asked for a business card or ID, he gave this half-laugh and said he didn't have time for all that. That's when I told him I wasn't comfortable letting him in. He stood there for a second like he was calculating something. Then he nodded, turned around, and walked off the porch without another word. I watched from the window as he disappeared down my driveway, and I thought that was the end of it. I even texted my sister like, "Some weirdo just tried to get into the house." But before I could even finish the message, I heard the soft thud of the backyard gate swinging open. My stomach dropped. I crept toward the kitchen and peeked out the back window, and there he was. Same vest, same blank eyes. He was at the sliding glass door, crouched low, trying to lift it off the track like he knew what he was doing. I froze. It was like something out of a nightmare. I didn't even think. I grabbed Mason from his crib. He was groggy and confused, and I booked it to the bedroom closet. It's one of those sliding door closets with a bunch of old coats jammed in, and I wedged us behind them as best I could. I dialed 911 with my thumb shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I remember whispering to the operator, "There's a man trying to break into my house. He came to the front, now he's at the back." She told me to stay on the line and stay quiet. That was probably the longest breath I've ever held in my life. Mason started to fuss, and I pressed his head against my chest, trying to keep him calm without making a sound. I could hear him, his boots crunching the gravel, the faint creak of the wooden deck, even the click of the sliding door's lock as he tested it again. Then silence. For maybe 20 seconds, I thought he'd left. But then the doorknob to the laundry room rattled. That door leads into the garage, which connects to the kitchen. He was circling the entire house, trying every possible way in. At one point, I swear I heard him talking to himself. Low, muttering, like he was arguing. Not loud enough to catch words, just this guttural murmur that made my skin crawl. The operator kept whispering updates. Officers were on their way, but I kept thinking, what if he gets in before they make it? What if he finds us? There's no lock on the closet door. No way to barricade it. I tried to remember if I left the back gate open earlier. I kept replaying every step of my morning like a tape loop in my brain, trying to figure out how he even got into the yard. That's when I heard the sharp bang. Something hit the glass. It wasn't a fist. It was sharper, like metal. Then another bang, and another. He was trying to break the door. And then, silence again. No more banging. No more footsteps. Just Mason's soft breathing and my heart thudding like it was going to punch a hole through my ribs. I held that phone like it was my only lifeline. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 10. I lost track of time completely. The operator finally whispered, "Ma'am, the officers are outside. They're approaching the house. Do not come out until they knock and identify themselves." I barely registered the knock when it came. I rushed to the window, saw 2 officers in uniform, and finally, let out the breath I'd been holding. They cleared the house with guns drawn, checking every room, every closet, even the crawl space. But the guy was gone. No sign of forced entry, but the officers saw the marks he left on the glass. Long, clean scratches where he'd tried to pry the door open with what looked like a flathead screwdriver. One of the officers asked if I'd seen a work truck or van nearby, but I hadn't. The street was completely quiet when he showed up. No vehicle, no sound of an engine. Just him, standing on the porch like he belonged there. It was like he'd walked right out of nowhere. They stayed with me while I gave my statement, and I'll never forget what the younger officer said as they were leaving. He looked around my living room and said, "You did everything right, but don't ever assume someone like that is working alone." That line stuck with me. It made me realize I never even considered if someone else had been nearby, watching, helping, blocking escape routes. I mean, the gate didn't creak when it opened. He knew how to move, how to check weak spots. That wasn't some random guy off the street. He had done this before. I changed the locks that same week, had motion lights and a security system installed the next day. Mason's crib got moved into my room, and I didn't sleep with the windows open for a long, long time. I called the gas company too. No one had been scheduled to visit, no inspections, nothing routine. Whoever he wasn't there to check anything. He was there to get inside. And if that sliding door hadn't held, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. That's what gets me the most. How close it came to becoming something else entirely. To this day, they never caught him. No leads, no suspects, nothing. Just a vague description. White male, 40s, utility vest, calm demeanor. He could have been anyone. Maybe he still is. I keep my eyes peeled now. I always listen for unfamiliar footsteps, always look twice before opening the door. Because the scariest part wasn't that he tried to get in, it's that he didn't run when I said no. He simply moved to the next door, like it was part of a routine, like he'd done it before. And maybe he has. I had just gotten out of surgery for a torn rotator cuff and wasn't supposed to lift anything heavier than a coffee mug. It was early spring last year, around the end of March, and I remember it clearly because everything in my house felt like it was covered in a layer of dust I couldn't clean myself. I live alone in a single-level house just outside of Boise, Idaho. Quiet neighborhood, kind of the place where people still wave at each other from across the street. I didn't have close family around, and the pain meds were making me feel like I was drifting in and out of time. So after a couple of days of trying to keep the place in order with one good arm, I gave up and decided to hire a cleaning service online. Nothing fancy. I found a local company through a Facebook ad with decent reviews and booked someone for the following morning. The woman on the phone was polite, said they'd send someone named Cheryl between 9 and 9:30 a.m. She asked if I had pets, any special instructions, all the typical stuff. Cheryl showed up right on time, mid-30s, blonde ponytail, faded blue hoodie with some company logo I didn't recognize. She smiled, handed me a business card, and asked for a quick tour. I led her around the living room, kitchen, and the hallway bathroom, mumbling instructions while my shoulder throbbed. She worked quickly, quietly, almost too efficiently. Like someone who'd done this 1,000 times but didn't want to be there. Still, nothing felt off at that point. I sat on the couch with a heating pad, half watching her dust shelves and hum to herself. It was peaceful, in a way. I started to doze off. I must have closed my eyes for no more than 15 minutes when I heard the front door open. No knock, no bell. Just the slow creak of the hinges and then footsteps. I sat up, a little disoriented, thinking maybe Cheryl had stepped out for something, but a tall guy in a gray zip-up hoodie and jeans walked into the living room like he owned the place. He had a trimmed beard and a backpack slung over one shoulder. When he saw me, he smiled like we were old friends and said, "Hey, I'm with Cheryl. We work together. She probably didn't mention I'd be dropping by to help." Something about the way he said it, too casual and rehearsed, made me pause. Cheryl walked out from the hallway a second later, and gave a small nod, not surprised to see him. I wanted to ask why no one rang the doorbell, but I hesitated. Maybe it was standard for them? Maybe I was being paranoid. I blamed the meds and the leftover anesthesia for the unease crawling up my spine. The guy, he introduced himself as Trent, started helping Cheryl with the vacuum cleaner and wiping down the countertops. Still, I couldn't shake that weird feeling. Every few minutes, one of them would glance toward the small cabinet in my hallway, the one where my safe was tucked behind a sliding panel. Not many people even noticed it was there, but I caught both their eyes drifting in that direction more than once. When Trent casually asked, "Hey man, that a gun safe or something?" I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't told anyone about that. Hell, it wasn't even visible unless you already knew what you were looking for. I tried to play it off. I laughed a little and said, "Nah, it's just where I keep old paperwork. Boring stuff." Trent nodded like he believed me, but his eyes lingered a second too long. Cheryl didn't say anything. She just kept wiping the same section of the kitchen counter like she was lost in thought. I could feel the air shift. You know that instinct, that subtle warning bell that starts ringing in the back of your head? That was getting louder by the second. I glanced at the clock. It was only 10:15, barely over an hour since she'd arrived. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in the way the house had gotten too quiet, like they were waiting for something. Or someone. I stood up from the couch, slowly, trying not to show how much effort it took with my bad shoulder. "I think I'm good here, guys. Appreciate the help, but I'm feeling kind of tired." I didn't know what else to say. I just needed them out. Trent looked over at Cheryl, then turned back to me with that same too smooth smile. "Totally, man. We'll just finish up the hallway real quick and be out of your hair." I nodded, but I started moving toward the door, trying to make it clear I was wrapping things up. That's when I heard it, the soft click of the deadbolt behind me. Trent had locked the front door. My throat went dry. I didn't even turn around at first. I just stood there staring at the door, listening to that tiny metallic echo that seemed to bounce around the walls like a warning shot. When I did finally look back, Cheryl was gone, completely out of view, and Trent was standing in the hallway now, between me and the room with the safe. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why'd you lock the door?" Trent shrugged. "Oh, just habit, man. Didn't want to let in a draft." His tone was light, but his posture had changed. Shoulders squared, stance more firm, like he was bracing for something. I wasn't armed. I couldn't even lift my arm properly. I felt exposed, like prey. I tried not to panic. "I think I need you both to leave now," I said, louder this time. That's when Cheryl reappeared, except now she wasn't holding a rag or a spray bottle. She had gloves on. Black, rubber gloves. The kind you use when you don't want to leave prints. My heart started pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. "Listen," Trent said. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to know what's in the safe. That's it. You give us that, and we're out." His voice was still weirdly calm, like this was all just a transaction. A regular Tuesday. But I could feel the sweat building under my shirt. I hadn't even told my best friend I had a safe. These two weren't cleaners. They were never cleaners. I took a step back toward the front door, my eyes darting between the two of them. I kept hoping this was some kind of sick misunderstanding, that they had the wrong house, or maybe they were bluffing. But the way Cheryl moved now, calm and deliberate, scanning the room like she was taking inventory, killed any doubt I had left. "There's nothing in the safe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's empty. I haven't used it in years." "Why?" Trent tilted his head, gave a soft chuckle, then said, "That's funny, 'cause you looked real uncomfortable when I mentioned it earlier." He wasn't wrong, but what really terrified me was how he'd said earlier. He remembered the exact moment I tensed up, like he'd been watching for it. I had to stall. I figured if I could keep them talking, maybe a neighbor would notice something, or I'd think of a way out. "Look," I said, "you can check it. There's literally nothing in there but tax documents and an old passport." Trent raised an eyebrow, as if considering it, then nodded. "All right, let's all go take a look then." He motioned toward the hallway. I didn't move. I couldn't. My feet were frozen, like every muscle in my body had locked up. That's when Cheryl stepped closer. "We don't want to hurt you," she said, but her eyes were empty, flat, like she was just reading lines. That made it worse. I would have preferred yelling or threats. At least then, it would have felt like something real people do when they're desperate. This felt rehearsed. I walked slowly toward the hallway, keeping my bad shoulder angled away from them, trying not to show how shaky my legs were. The safe was hidden behind a thin panel in the wall across from my bedroom. I reached out and slid it open, revealing the small digital keypad. "See?" I said, voice cracking. "It's locked. You can open it if you want." Trent walked up beside me and knelt down, studying the keypad like it was a puzzle. "We'll need the code," he said, almost casually. "I forgot it," I lied. Instantly, without thinking. Cheryl scoffed behind me. "Really? That's what you're going with?" I didn't answer. My mind was going 1,000 miles an hour, but none of the thoughts were helpful. I just kept thinking, this is really happening. These people are in my house. And I let them in. Then came the sound that flipped everything. A knock at the door. 3 sharp, solid knocks. All of us froze. Cheryl looked at Trent. Trent looked at me. No one said a word. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow, the air too thick. I took a breath and shouted, "One sec!" hoping whoever it was wouldn't leave. Trent grabbed my arm, my bad arm, and pulled me back toward the bedroom, whispering, "You say anything stupid, we'll both be gone before they even realize something's off." The pain shot through me like fire, but I nodded. He let go. Cheryl stayed hidden by the hallway wall while I hobbled back toward the front door, heart racing. I cracked it open just an inch. Enough to see my neighbor, Mr. Gaines, standing there in his fishing vest, holding a Tupperware container. Mr. Gaines was in his late 60s, lived 2 houses down, and had this habit of bringing people leftovers from his weekly fish fry. I never thought I'd be so relieved to see his sunburnt, smiling face. "Figured you could use something warm while you're healing," he said, holding out the container. I opened the door a little wider and forced a smile, trying not to let the fear show on my face. "Thanks, that's real kind of you." I glanced over my shoulder. Cheryl had ducked completely out of sight. Trent was probably right behind the corner. "Actually," I added quickly, "could you come in for a sec? I need a hand with something." His smile faltered a little, confused, but then he nodded. The moment Mr. Gaines stepped inside, I felt the air change. Not tension, exactly, more like static. Like someone had just cut a wire that was holding everything together. Cheryl reappeared in the hallway, eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Trent walked out too, slower this time, his hands open like he wasn't hiding anything. "We were just finishing up," he said to Mr. Gaines, voice smooth as ever. "You're the neighbor?" Mr. Gaines glanced at me, then back at Trent, nodding slowly. "Yeah." "Why?" Trent shrugged. "Just being friendly." I could see him calculating, weighing the risk. And then, just like that, he gave Cheryl a look, and they both moved toward the door. "We'll reschedule," he said without waiting for a reply. They were gone in seconds. I stood there frozen for a minute, the door wide open, the wind coming in. Mr. Gaines looked at me and asked, "What the hell was that about?" I closed the door and locked it. "I don't know," I told him, and it wasn't a lie. I really didn't. I told him everything a few minutes later while we sat at the kitchen table, his Tupperware untouched between us. He insisted I call the cops, so I did. Gave them the names, the business card, everything. Turns out the cleaning company was real, but Cheryl had never worked for them. Neither had Trent. The company didn't even offer in-home service outside of commercial offices. They'd used the logo, the website, everything. But it was a setup. The safe, by the way, really was empty. I hadn't used it in years. Maybe they thought I was keeping pills in there, or money. I'll never know what they were expecting to find. The cops didn't catch them. Still haven't. But a few days later I bought a new lock, cameras, and a door chain. I never leave it unlocked now. Sometimes when I'm half asleep I still hear that soft click of the deadbolt behind me. And every time I open the door to someone new, part of me still wonders, what if I hadn't answered? What if Mr. Gaines hadn't shown up with fish that day? I don't know what their plan was if things had gone differently, but I know I wasn't meant to walk away from it. I'm not really the type to post stuff online, especially not something like this, but I haven't been able to sleep right since it happened. My name's Lisa. I'm 27, and I work as a pharmacy assistant in a small drugstore just a few blocks from where I live in a quiet part of town. I live alone, in a small ground-floor apartment tucked behind an older complex, the kind with a single hallway entrance and front porches that face the street. It's not fancy, but it's mine, and up until a few months ago, I honestly felt pretty safe there. Life was simple: work, home, maybe a coffee with my sister once a week. I didn't think I was the kind of person who would end up in a story like this. It started with a guy who came into the pharmacy. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s, scruffy beard, always wearing a navy windbreaker no matter the weather. He never bought anything unusual, usually just allergy meds or ibuprofen, but he'd linger. At first it was just awkward small talk, like asking if I worked there full-time or what my lucky number was on the cash register. Then he started commenting on my appearance. Nothing aggressive, just off. Things like, "You look prettier without your mask," or "Bet your boyfriend's a lucky guy." I'd laugh politely, the way women are kind of trained to when we're uncomfortable. But eventually I got tired of it and stopped engaging. A week later, he stopped coming in. I honestly felt relieved. But then I noticed this beat-up silver sedan parked across from my apartment building. Same spot, every night when I got home from work. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see the driver, but it was just there, always idling. I tried to brush it off, told myself it was a neighbor's friend or someone waiting for an Uber, but it kept happening. I told my friend Mia about it over FaceTime one night and even joked that I had a creepy admirer. She told me to start writing down the dates and times just in case. That was the first time it felt real, like maybe I wasn't overthinking it. Then the packages started showing up. Weird stuff. A plush toy rabbit with no note. A box of bath bombs I never ordered. One morning, I found a single rose laid gently across my welcome mat. No card, no name. I called the post office, and they had no record of any deliveries. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was the only one who could see that something wasn't right. I even asked my landlord if there was a camera at the front entrance, but he just shrugged and said the complex was too old school for that kind of thing. I started double-checking my locks every night and keeping the TV on for background noise, even when I went to bed. I didn't want silence anymore. Things came to a head about 3 weeks after the first package. I'd picked up an extra evening shift at the pharmacy and didn't get home until almost 11 p.m. The street was quiet, and that silver sedan wasn't there, for the first time in weeks. I actually felt a small wave of relief as I walked up to my front door. But when I got closer, something felt off. My porch light was on, but the door wasn't closed all the way. It was open just a crack, like someone hadn't shut it properly. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd locked it. I always locked it. It was muscle memory at that point. I stood there frozen, holding my keys so tight they left little crescents in my palm. For a second, I convinced myself I must have forgotten. Maybe I rushed out that morning and didn't pull it closed. But then I noticed the scratches on the doorknob. Not huge, but fresh. Like someone had used something to force it open, or maybe, God, I didn't want to think it. Maybe they had a key. I slowly pushed the door open with my foot. My living room light was off, but I could see just enough from the glow of the street lamp through my blinds. The coffee table was crooked. A drawer from the TV stand was hanging open. My throat tightened. I whispered, "Hello?" like a complete idiot, as if whoever had broken in would casually answer back. I stepped inside slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it behind my eyes. The carpet was damp. That didn't make sense. There hadn't been any rain. Then I looked down and saw them. Muddy footprints, big ones, spaced wide apart like someone had walked in heavy boots straight into my apartment. They led from the front door to the hallway. I followed them with my eyes, too scared to move. They stopped at the closet. Not the coat closet by the door. The hallway closet. The one across from my bedroom. I backed up. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone as I locked myself in the bathroom. I didn't even think. I just slammed the door, clicked the lock, and dropped to the floor. I couldn't hear anything. No movement, no voices. Just the sound of my own breathing getting faster and faster. I called 911 and told them someone was inside my apartment, possibly hiding in the closet. The operator kept asking me to stay on the line, stay calm, tell them what I could see. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted someone to get there fast enough. It felt like an eternity before I heard the sirens. 2 officers knocked and called out, and I shouted back that I was in the bathroom. When they opened the door, I could finally breathe again, but only a little. One of them asked me to stay put while they cleared the apartment. I could hear them moving from room to room, opening doors. Then finally, one of them yelled, "Hands where I can see them!" There was a commotion, thuds, a loud crash, and then silence. A few minutes later, one of the officers came back and told me they'd found someone. He'd been hiding in the hallway closet just like I feared. The man was the same guy from the pharmacy, the one with the windbreaker. He'd stolen a copy of my spare key from the hook we kept behind the counter. I remembered it suddenly. He had asked once if the store had a bathroom, and I told him no, but pointed him toward the public one across the street. He must have slipped around while I was helping someone else. The cops said he'd been inside for hours, maybe longer. He had a backpack with him that had snacks, a phone charger, and an old disposable camera. Inside the closet, they found some of my clothes. Stuff I didn't even realize had gone missing. I moved out of that apartment 2 weeks later. Couldn't sleep there after that night. Every creak, every shadow made me panic. I kept replaying it in my head. How many nights had he been in there without me knowing? Had he ever watched me sleep? I still don't know the answer. The police told me he'd been building up to something, maybe waiting for the right moment. That thought alone still keeps me up sometimes. I got a new place in a different part of town, this time on the 2nd floor with cameras, motion lights, and a dog. A big one. I haven't seen him since. He was charged with trespassing, theft, and stalking, but apparently didn't have a record, so he didn't stay in custody long. That's the part that really messes with my head. He could be out there, watching someone else now. Or maybe he's watching me again. I don't know. What I do know is this. If you ever feel like something's off, even just a little, trust it. Don't wait for proof. The gut feeling you get when something isn't right. It's there for a reason. I ignored mine too long. I was lucky. Someone else might not be. I'm not the type of guy who usually shares stuff online, But what happened to me 2 months ago hasn't stopped replaying in my head. Maybe writing it down will help, or at least warn someone else. I'm 29, a freelance photographer based in Chicago. I live alone in a loft near the river, one of those older buildings that was turned into overpriced apartments with big windows and bad insulation. It's nothing fancy, but I liked the vibe. The night it happened, I was coming back from a shoot that had run late. Real estate photos for some luxury condos. The kind of job that pays decent but sucks the soul out of you. I remember the air was cold that night, not freezing, just sharp. I had my gear in the back seat of the rideshare, carefully packed in 2 padded cases. The driver, a guy in his 40s maybe, short buzz cut, had this energy that made me keep my guard up. Too chatty, too curious. He asked about the gear after seeing the cases. I brushed it off at first, but eventually mentioned it was camera stuff. He pressed more. What kind of cameras, what they cost, where I shoot. And I, stupidly, gave him more than I should have. I guess I was tired. Or maybe I just didn't want to be rude. He dropped me off a little after midnight. The street was dead quiet. He pulled away slowly, like he was waiting for something. I watched from the window as I keyed into the building. I live on the 3rd floor, and like always, I took the stairs. The elevator in our building's more of a rumor than a service. I didn't even unpack right away. Dropped the gear in the corner, took off my jacket, and collapsed on the couch. I must have scrolled through TikTok for an hour. At one point, I actually remember thinking, man, that driver was kinda weird. But I didn't dwell on it. That was mistake number 2. Around 1:30 a.m., the buzzer rang. It startled me, since nobody ever comes by unannounced that late. I checked the intercom. A man's voice said he had a package for Daniel, that it required a signature. That's not super unusual in my building. Couriers sometimes buzz random units hoping someone will open the door. But something felt off. The voice was too familiar, too casual. And then it hit me. It was the same guy. The driver. Same tone. Same weird calmness. I didn't say anything. I just stood there frozen, hand hovering over the intercom button. And then the buzzer went dead. 5 seconds later, I heard a loud bang from downstairs. The front door had just been kicked in. I barely had time to move. I heard heavy footsteps storming up the stairs, fast and deliberate. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't even think about calling the cops. I just backed away from the door and grabbed the closest thing I could find. A tripod. Not exactly a weapon, but it made me feel less helpless. Before I could even decide where to hide, my door exploded inward. I mean it. They kicked it hard enough to send the lock flying. 2 guys came in. One of them was definitely the driver. The other was taller, wearing a black ski mask. Both had guns. Not the little kind either. Real ones, like from a heist movie. They yelled at me to get on the ground. I froze, still holding the tripod like an idiot. The masked guy rushed me, slammed the butt of his gun into my shoulder, and I went down hard. Before I could react, he tied my wrists behind my back with zip ties. I remember how cold the floor felt on my cheek, and how quiet the room got for a second. Like even the city outside was holding its breath. Then they started tearing the place apart. Not trashing it. They were surgical. Straight to the gear cases. They opened them carefully, looked through my lenses like they knew exactly what to look for. The driver kept talking while they moved, like he wanted me to know this was personal. "You shouldn't tell strangers how much your stuff's worth," he said. His voice was calm, almost smug. I kept thinking, why me? How did this escalate so fast? He told the other guy, "This is the Leica. He said it's worth over $6,000. I hadn't said that, not directly. But I guess he did the math during the ride. They stuffed everything into a big duffel bag. Cameras, lenses, hard drives. They even took my laptop and backup cards. My whole career, basically, in one grab. While they worked, I tried not to move, not to breathe too loud. At one point, the taller guy came back over and kicked me in the ribs. I think it was just to remind me they were in control. "Don't try anything, all right? You're lucky we're not here to kill you," he said. That was the first time I really felt the fear hit me in waves, not just because they were armed, but because they could have done anything, and no one would have known for hours. I started shaking, not from pain, but from that sick realization that I'd been picked, watched, listened to, targeted. This wasn't random. It was planned, and I had walked right into it. After they took everything, the two of them just left. No dramatic exit, no threats. They walked out like they knew no one would stop them. I laid there for a while, wrists zip-tied, bleeding from my lip, ribs aching. My phone was gone, but I still had my old tablet under the couch. I inched my way over, knocked it out with my shoulder, and used my nose to hit the power button. It was pathetic, but it worked. I managed to FaceTime my brother, who lives a few blocks away. He freaked when he saw me and called 911 immediately. The cops showed up maybe 20 minutes later. They cut me loose, took a statement, started snapping photos. I kept expecting them to tell me they'd find the guys. That this kind of thing doesn't just happen without someone slipping up, but you could tell by their tone, their questions, that they'd seen this before. One of the officers said, "You said it was a rideshare driver? Do you remember the license plate?" I didn't. I only remembered the face. The platform wouldn't give me the full name either. Privacy policy and all that crap. A few days later, the detective assigned to my case told me something that chilled me more than the actual break-in. The rideshare company had flagged that driver's account. Apparently, there were 2 other reports, both vague, nothing criminal. Just weird vibes, unprofessional behavior. But here's the part that made my stomach turn. They also told me the driver hadn't ended the trip properly that night. He left it running for over an hour, which meant he marked the location. That's how he came back. He used the app's trip history to tag my address, then returned later with his partner. Insurance covered almost none of it. Technically, I was negligent for not storing the equipment in a secured location. The landlord changed my door lock, but I moved out a month later anyway. Couldn't sleep there. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway or someone buzzed, my chest would tighten. I still have nightmares, not about the robbery itself, but about the moment the buzzer rang. That split second when I felt something was wrong, and I did nothing. That's the part that haunts me. How close I was to stopping it. How fast normal turns into nightmare. If you're reading this and you're a freelancer like me, or hell, anyone who takes ride shares at night, just don't talk about your gear. Don't talk about what you do or where you live. It sucks that we have to think like that, but I learned the hard way that being friendly with the wrong person can cost you everything. I still take pictures, but I haven't done a solo night shoot since. And I always check the driver's face twice now. I'm Isabel, 24, and I've lived alone for almost 2 years now in a 3rd-floor apartment in a busy downtown complex. I work as a paralegal, which means my weekdays are usually long and exhausting, filled with paperwork, depositions, and people who treat you like a coffee fetcher. I moved into this place because it was close to the firm and felt safe. A secure building with passcodes, cameras in the lobby, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. The unit above mine had been empty for months, supposedly under renovation, though I'd never actually seen a contractor go in or out. At first, I was relieved not to have any noisy upstairs neighbors, but that silence didn't last long. About 3 weeks in, I started hearing noises late at night, always around 2 or 3 a.m. They weren't the kind of sounds you could easily explain away. It wasn't the pipes, and it wasn't animals. It was heavier, like a thud, or the sound of something or someone dropping to the floor and standing still. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was a building shift, or construction from a nearby unit, or some echo from the outside. I even joked to my coworker that it sounded like someone was bowling upstairs. But inside, I didn't feel like laughing. I felt watched. Then one night, I was brushing my teeth around 11:30 when I heard it again. A short, sharp thump directly above the bathroom. I froze, toothbrush mid-air. It wasn't just a sound, it felt like weight, like someone had landed. I went still and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no follow-up creaks. Just that one perfect thud. I checked the front door, all locked, the windows too. I even stood on my bed to knock on the ceiling, hoping for, I don't even know, confirmation that it was nothing. But it was solid, dead silent. I convinced myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I just needed sleep. Fast forward to about a week later. It was 2:30 a.m. when I shot awake for no clear reason. No sound, no dream, just a jolt. My heart was already pounding before I even moved. I turned my head toward the hallway and saw it. The light was on. I always turn off the hallway light before bed. My stomach dropped. I stayed completely still under the covers for a few seconds, my ears straining for any noise. Nothing. I didn't hear the front door, didn't hear a window open. Everything else was pitch black. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and crept toward the hallway like I was trying not to breathe. The hallway looked completely normal, which made it even worse. Nothing was out of place. No open door, no flickering lights. Just that soft, steady glow above me, like it had been turned on by someone who knew exactly where the switch was. I checked the front door again. Locked, deadbolt still turned. Windows, shut tight, no signs of forced entry. That's when I remembered something that made my blood run cold. In my bedroom closet, above the top shelf, there's this little square hatch that leads to the attic crawl space. I'd only looked at it once, months ago, just long enough to slam it shut and pretend it didn't exist. But I had this awful, gut-wrenching feeling that maybe it hadn't stayed shut. I crept back to my room, flipped on the closet light, and stood there staring up at the hatch. At first I couldn't tell. Everything looked undisturbed. But then I noticed the faintest smudge on the edge of the shelf below it. A streak. Like something had dragged across it. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to be right. But I also couldn't not look. I grabbed a chair, climbed up just enough to push on the hatch, and it moved. It wasn't locked. It opened way too easily. And behind it, nothing but black. Cold, dusty, silent black. I jumped down and shut the closet door hard, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. I wanted to run out of the apartment, but something in me said not to make noise. I don't know why. I just felt like he was still inside. Instead, I slowly unlocked the balcony door and slipped outside, pulling it shut behind me. It was freezing. I crouched down near the far corner, trying to stay out of sight. That's when I texted Max, the guy in 3B. We'd spoken maybe 3 times, just polite neighbor stuff, but I remembered him saying he was a night owl. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. I texted, "Are you awake? I think someone's in my apartment. I'm on my balcony. Please don't knock. Just call the police." Max responded within seconds. "Don't move. I'm calling now." I waited there, pressed against the wall in the dark, hearing every creak in the building like it was amplified through a speaker. I thought I heard a floorboard shift inside my place. I thought I saw the hallway light flicker. But I couldn't be sure if it was real or if my brain was breaking under the pressure. Every sound became a threat. I was fully convinced he was still in there. Some stranger who'd climbed down from the attic while I slept. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know how long he'd been watching me. I just knew I wasn't safe. The cops showed up fast, maybe 5-6 minutes later, but it felt like hours. I watched from the balcony as 2 officers entered the building, and Max texted me again. "They're inside. Stay put." I stayed curled up in the corner, frozen, as I heard the muffled knock on my door. Then the officers calling out, identifying themselves. I didn't move until one of them opened the balcony door and found me. I was shaking so bad I couldn't even talk at first. They walked me out and had me wait with another officer in the hallway while they swept the apartment. It felt surreal, standing there in my pajamas while strangers with guns searched my tiny, cluttered space. And then one of them opened the closet and the hatch. I'll never forget what the officer said. He called out, calm but sharp, "We've got movement." Everything went quiet for a second. Then a scuffle. I couldn't see what was happening, but I heard heavy steps, a crash, and then, "He's coming down!" My legs nearly gave out. They escorted a man out in cuffs, his face pale and expressionless. Not angry, not panicked, just blank, like he wasn't really there. He looked about mid-40s, wearing a dirty hoodie and socks that didn't match. The officer later told me he'd been living in the attic for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. There was a small sleeping bag, food wrappers, and even a notepad with dates and names. The creepiest part, he had scribbled notes about multiple tenants, apartment numbers, routines, names he'd overheard. Mine was one of them. The officer said the man had likely come down multiple times, watching tenants in the middle of the night, taking things, sometimes just standing there. When I asked how he even got in originally, they guessed he had once entered during the day while the building was doing fire alarm inspections, left the hatch unlocked. After that, he'd stayed. I don't know how he was surviving up there without anyone hearing him more clearly. I guess the timing, the insulation, and my own denial all worked in his favor. But he was definitely real, and he was definitely inside. I moved out 2 weeks later. I couldn't stay there. Even though they sealed the attic access and changed the locks, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how close he was, above my head, maybe feet away, while I brushed my teeth or talked on the phone. I still don't know what his endgame was. If he wanted to hurt someone, or if he just liked watching. That's almost worse, not knowing. But I do know this. From now on, I check the ceiling. Every time I move into a new place, I look up. I look for hatches, vents, crawl spaces, anything. Because if I learned anything from that night, it's that the scariest things aren't ghosts or shadows. It's real people. People who don't knock,